quick to this computer. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the 32nd celebration of the completion of the book of Tehillim. We say one psalm a day in thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God, for all the blessings he showers upon us. So many times we get caught up in our problems because we all have problems because that's why God put us here on this earth is to have challenges. And and so sometimes the challenges overtakes the blessings. So it's nice to say one psalm a day just to thank Hashem proactively that if he gives us the blessings. And if we say, Hashem, you don't have to give me more challenges to remember you, to thank you. Um, I'm thanking you right now. And I'm going to think of 5 things I'm thankful for before I say my Tehillim so that you don't have to give me an extra potch to thank you. So anyway, that's our proactive daily gratitude Tehillim group. You can find us at dailygratitudetehillim.com to find out more information. And today we are blessed to have Wendy Weiner Runge, who is going to speak to us about her adventures in life. And before that, we are going to have Beth Jawari just say a few words because she is sponsoring this Tehillim celebration. And Beth, tell us about your mother, you were sponsoring this um, celebration.
Yes. Okay. So thank you, first of all, Lori, and everybody who's here. And thank you for allowing me to do this and for the actual merit of being part of this group because it's been very inspiring and in some ways, I want to say even life-saving. That's another story. But my mom, Sarah Mendel Bas Akiva Mendel, who left us actually 26 years ago, I had an error in calculating, she called herself a lifelong learner. And I really believe she passed that on to her 4 daughters, we're 4 girls, and that we have had the merit of passing that on to all of our children because all of us in the family and the children, her grandchildren now, and now even her great grandchildren are voracious readers and voracious learners. And so the opportunity to sponsor something where we get to learn, where we get to grow, just seemed right up the right alley to honor my mother's memory and hopefully give her neshama the aliyah it deserves. So thank you all.
Thank you. Okay. And now I'm going to introduce our wonderful speaker. As it says on our flyer, born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska, Wendy and her sisters became Balt Shuva as teenagers. She comes from a long line of gifted storytellers and people who love to laugh. Wendy writes and produces feature films and TV and feels she's blessed beyond measure. Wendy's going to share her story that despite being innocent of all crime, she was sentenced to 10 years in a women's maximum security prison. The talk she's giving is called Finding Light in Dark Places, and it's an inspirational talk that will stay with you for many years. Wendy, I'm blessed to know you. I know your sister. And I just want to say one thing about Wendy. She has an amazing energy, as you will see when she speaks. She is the kind of person that you meet and you feel like she's your best friend within about 1 minute because she's just got this personal energy, this vibe that is so special. And she's also one of my fellow matchmakers now. I don't know how long she's been doing it, but she's come into the world of matchmaking, which is exciting for me to have another acquaintance in that area. So, okay, Wendy, take it away and share your story.
Thank you so much. What a beautiful introduction. I wish that my voice merited anything close to that introduction. I am just, so Baruch Hashem, 2 weeks ago, in the day, again, it's Blur's Day, every day is Blur's Day. Our son in Las Vegas and daughter-in-law gave us a beautiful baby boy. So that entailed they took care of baby boy, who was named for my father, which is an amazing thing. My father just last year we lost mom and dad. And I wiped the noses of the other three because they're perpetual little petri dishes. And then my husband and I both got sick. And he, thank God, he like said, okay, I'm done. And he like stayed 2 days in bed and he was fine. I'm a woman. I can do this. No, I sound like I ate peas. I'll do my very best to give you the full story. And the baby's fine. All the little kids are fine. They're all fine, thank God. Our daughter, youngest daughter, came home for Hanukkah, and we gave it to her too. It's not like we don't share things. We do share things in this family. So it's a privilege to see you all. It's a privilege to be honored to ask, even ask to come speak, Lori. Lori and I have known each other for a long time, and I am gifted that I know Lori, but I know her younger sister. So it's like it's super fun to see like I'm watching you speak. I'm like, oh, I've seen Beth say that. It's very cute. So it's a great juxtaposition. I spent a lot of quality time in Seattle with Beth and her family and my family as my parents retired to Seattle and then lived there through the rest of their lives. So that said, I am thrilled to be here and like I don't really look like your typical convicted felon, which is kind of a cool thing because that's not really an attractive look. And it's not something I ever anticipated doing. I anticipated doing business in Iowa. And unbeknownst to me at that moment in time, Iowa was at their most, or maybe not their most, but they were significantly anti Semitic and they were very anti women in business. And they were just kind of anti. And I did business every step of the way. Off Halachically, my Rav was on top of everything. I had three attorneys working full time, but when on my projects, and when everything collapsed on their own program, they were giving a generous incentive in Iowa, which is my parents' home state. So it was kind of fun to go back. Initially, it was really fun to go back to Iowa, go to Iowa and help them build their economic development, and which is exactly what I was asked to do. So at the end of like all my attorneys, everything working everything out, they decided that after the program had collapsed under its own weight, that I must be responsible. I live in New St. Louis Park, Minnesota. So I live 250 miles away. Doing business in Iowa was momish. Like you would email or you'd go to an office and you'd hand them a form. And the guy behind the counter would look at it and he'd say, okay, that's good. Oh, you need to change that. And he'd do that. And that was the end of it. That was my extent of working. And then my attorneys and my accountants did all the rest of the business. Again, with my Rav, continue. Side note, my Rav, Chaim Yaakov Ben Chana Bela means Refuah Shalema. So if we can add it to our list. My Rav on top of everything I did. And it was all completely not only legal and legitimate and kosher and ethical. And we had the only Shomer Shabbos film shoot in the entire in the world, as far as I'm aware. And we had put out great product that was really meaningful and powerful, very emotionally spiritual material. They just decided that I was in charge. I must have been the one who was wrong because I had the most outstanding contracts. And by having the most outstanding contracts, meaning things that were to be done, projects to be done, when they reneged on their contracts with me and all the other producers were suing and winning, but I wasn't in the middle of a project, so I didn't file a lawsuit. And those producers were winning, and I had $84 million worth of projects that were upcoming in the next 2 years. So it turned out that $84 million, if they were paying half of everything I spent back to me, and they decided not to continue, not me, they decided, then the state of Iowa legally owed me $42 million, which I never would have claimed, I never would have accepted because I hadn't done the work. But they didn't, they chose strategically and kind of sophomorically not to ever interview me. The day I was arrested, sitting in this very chair here, why do I still sit at my dining room table? Where I get a phone call after I'd completed two very large projects. And I say everyone was all complimentary. Is exactly what we want. Do more, do more. I get a phone call and that says there's a warrant being issued for your arrest in the state of Iowa. I was like, why? And he said, well, you clearly must have. They'll be filing charges and there'll be things you did that we didn't want you to do. So from that day, February 10th of 2010, until this very day, they've never asked me a question. They never asked me, so what does this mean? Can you show us your books? Or whatever. They just needed to get somebody that was liable, and it couldn't be the people in the house, although the state film commissioner was arrested first. And so I never had a parking ticket. I never had a speeding ticket. I knew nothing about the legal system. So I paid an attorney. That wasn't, he didn't know what he was doing. Another one, expensive, didn't know what they're doing. A third attorney, my third attorney, was a gift from God. His name was Matthew Whitaker. He later became, in the first Trump administration, he became the acting attorney general of the United States. A fantastic, a mensch, Christian, a mensch. And he said, look, you didn't do anything wrong. I said, I know. What are we going to do? He said, they've got a great case against you because they have all this conjecture. And other people said, we'll say whatever you need us to say in order to let us go and give it, put it on her. I went to trial, and my assistant at the time happened to have a criminal justice degree. So he helped me all the way through the trial. I knew nothing, how to file anything, and how to even find a good attorney. And so I'd never done anything like that before. Like, I had entertainment attorneys and business attorneys, but not a criminal. And because I didn't think I was a criminal. And they just didn't care. They just didn't care. It went to trial. The first directive given by the judge when the jury was assembled for voir dire to pick the jury, there was like 100 people assembled. And it was a very high profile case. It's Hollywood. It's not Hollywood, it's Des Moines, whatever. And the judge said, if you get a parking ticket for parking out here, because there's so many of you, I'll fix it for you. Don't worry. So I looked at my attorney and I said, isn't that illegal? And he said, oh, we're in trouble. And I said, okay. You just know walking in that they're just, so you get to that space where you're like, well, who's in charge here? Now, I'm not going to say, so I spent a year going to trial. And then I, at the end of an 8-day trial that was as close as I can compare to active labor and being in Gehenna. Like, it was just here in sense every day, the jurors, and it's illegal, walk in with a newspaper under their arm with my face on the cover, and they'd throw it away. And the judge would say, now you're not reading the media, are you? Oh, no, Your Honor. Like, it was just so set up, and we knew this. At the end of an 8-day trial, they realized their fatal error. You never ask a question in a courtroom that you don't know the answer to. And they'd never asked me a question. And I was scared to take the stand. So here they're going to bring me on the stand in the court and all my evidence, and they did not know what I was going to say. So that's when the plea bargains started coming. They're like, oh, we need a recess. And they kept offering plea bargains. I said, I will not take a felony conviction. I do not want to lose my right to vote. I did not do anything. I didn't do anything at all. I want to walk away from this. And the fourth time they kept lessening and lessening the charge. And my attorney came back in the room and he said, Wendy, you just have to plead guilty to one thing. I had 5 felony counts. Plead guilty to one thing. They'll stand silent during sentencing. Usually the prosecutor says, oh, she gets a max or whatever, or she should get 2 years or whatever it is. But they said they will stand silent during sentencing. And then after that, hopefully they'll go home. The judge will see the clarity of it. So I pled guilty to forwarding an email from the state film commissioner to another production company. I have no commercial relationship with them. There's no like, oh, I'll give you $100. There's nothing. They asked a question. He answered me instead of them, and I just forwarded the email. And they said, that's an intent to commit fraud. We're not going to let you do that. So I said, I didn't know that forwarding an email was illegal. I would never have done it had I known, and I'm sorry. And the judge said, and then so, right, I said, we walked out. 2 months later, I came back for sentencing, and the judge had decided that I deserved the maximum for this one offense, 10 years in a women's maximum security prison. Meanwhile, The state film commissioner had 9 felony counts against him. And the tax credit broker was a CPA in the state, and he had 5 or 6 felony charges against him. But they were going to get somebody, and it had to be me, because they couldn't get those guys because they had endorsed those guys because they worked for them. They worked for the state. So I walked out. I walked. Bell tolls for thee, right? I walked out, and I walked into the courtroom, and they said, "You were 10 years. You clearly disrupted 2 different departments of state government, and you deserve the maximum penalty." Now, and you have shown no remorse. Inherently, a guilty plea is remorse, whatever. And they shackled me up right there and took me away. And my attorney said to me, "Do you know the last thing you said to me?" I said, "I don't." "Is it terrible?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Have a nice life." He said, "You thought I was going to leave you in there." I didn't know. Because we were blindsided. I didn't know anything. So they shackled me up and take me down into the holding cell. And my attorney worked behind the scenes, and I was out. So I'm standing there and I'm holding a piece of paper that they give you, and you're shackled up, and they whisk you down, and you're gone. And this woman, drug dealer probably, and never saw her again. She looked over my shoulder and she goes, "Oh, honey, do you know what that means? We hadn't thought any of this was going to happen." And I said, What means? And she said, "This right here, this line right here." And I said, "What does it mean?" He said, "You could have an appeal bond. So if you're going to appeal this, you could get out today." And all of a sudden, I was like, okay, I see Hashem's hand in this. This is going to be so interesting. So I'm sitting there and I'm waiting for my attorney to actually activate this whole situation. And I see a woman on the bench who's sitting there in a very nice dress, in a holding cell, shackled up on a bench, long dark hair, dark eyes. And she is so angry, but like controlled anger. And I listened to her speak for a minute to another gal, and she was kind of counseling her. Clearly, she was an attorney. And I turned to her and I said, "Excuse me, are you Jewish?" And she looked at me and she's like, "How'd you know? Like, what are the chances of 2 Jewish professional women being in lockup in Des Moines, Iowa at the same moment?" Okay. So her name, she's an attorney, and she was angry that the judge would not continue a restraining order for a client of hers who had been severely beaten by her former husband or something. And he said, "No, we don't need he's fine. He's shown remorse. He's fine." And she got out of the judge, and the judge gave her 30 days in jail for contempt of court. How is it that Hashem arranged for this woman and me to be in the same lockup at the same time? So, because he can do anything, it's not for him to do it, it's for us to open our eyes and see what he's doing. So I spent time with her, and she said, "I'm a severe asthmatic, and they're not going to give you my inhaler." And of all things, once in a while when I get this, and I had been like, my attorneys had prepped it so that like at least I had medication if I needed, and I had gotten an inhaler. And I was fine. I didn't need it, but she was going to die without it. Like, she needed it so badly. And I said, "You're a yid." And you hear you can't give anybody anything, usually drugs, whatever. I said, "You're a yid, and I'd rather die in here than know that I have an inhaler that you need." And I slipped it to her. And the entire time she was in prison, she hid it. We took off the label, whatever, and she hid it, and it kept her alive. And we're still friends today. She did tremendous chesed for me once I got out and got through whatever. And so you're like, wow, like, how does this happen? So my mother, God rest her soul, used to say to me all the time, "Wendy, you're never uncomfortable anywhere." And I say, "Well, okay, let's check, Mom." And I got to this place. I was like, well, I guess Mom's right. I'm not uncomfortable in here. I figure I can make friends. I can figure out the system. I can really make the guards. Everybody knew that I was in there it was just bogus. Like, they just knew. Guards would come to me and say, "When are you getting out? Come on, you don't belong here. When are you getting out?" And they say the same thing. As soon as God decides that I can do more good outside than inside. But right now, apparently I'm needed here. Okay. So, and they were very kind to me in all kinds of ways that were very quiet and very subtle, but I could see it. It didn't mean I wasn't angry at first. I had a home, I had a husband, my son's bar mitzvah. I missed my son's bar mitzvah. My youngest son, I had a daughter who just got married, who, like all kinds of things. Like I was angry a bit. I was angry the whole time and then going in. And then like meeting her and like that, like seeing, allowing myself to see Hashem work for me, do things for me, not to me, change my perspective. And then I realized that the whole time I've been angry, for 2 years that I've been like draying with this thing rather than doing business or having my mind on other things or learning more, anything, was because I was inconvenienced. And inconvenience means it was my ego talking. I shouldn't be here. Well, why not me? Why not me? What is it about me that's different? I didn't commit a crime. We all knew it. So why am I here? And so the answer I came up with was my ego is making me angry and I'm going to let that go. And I cannot have an ego in here because that would be ridiculous, except I knew I was a king, daughter of the king. So I was going to just, that it's not an ego thing. It's a fact. It is what it is. And I have to act accordingly. So I made it my decision to help everybody I could. And they really, for a while, they were going to put me in isolation because they were afraid that the Muslim women or the white supremacist chicks would kill me. No, I got along with all of them. I wrote commutations and appeals, and I'm not an attorney, but I'm a writer, so I can tell their story. And I counseled a bunch of women, and I did everything I could. And women who life with no chance of parole, at least two, and I'm working on a third. Two, no life with no chance of parole means that you have no chance unless the parole board once a year grants they recommend to the governor that one man and one woman gets a commutation, which means their sentence is not canceled, but they should send it. And usually they're older and infirm, and they're costing the system a lot of money for medical care. And so I wrote commutations for people who are, it's President Obama. Like because they had not committed a crime, if they could show me their files and show me they hadn't committed a crime and they just got caught in the system, which is so pervasive in the women's, criminal justice, then I wrote their commutations. I wrote their paperwork. I did appeals. There was a woman, an adorable woman who was incarcerated for 5 years. She was an addict and an alcoholic, a new mom, and she got drunk in a bar and she was walking home, a little tiny thing, 5 feet tall, 100 pounds. And she was walking home and she was grabbed and pulled into an alley by a man who'd seen her in the bar. And he had taken from the bar, he'd taken a steak knife. So that was his weapon. And somehow this little fiery thing was not going to be assaulted by him. She turned the weapon around and she gave him he needed 5 stitches. And he knew how to spin it. And then he said, oh, she attacked me. And so she got 5 years. Now, arguably, she said, being required to go to treatment was the best thing that ever happened to her. But she got 2 years of treatment and then 3 years beyond that. So this little Ashley is her name. Beautiful little girl. But by the time I knew her, 5-year-old boy, living with her parents. And she had gotten her act together. And she was the head of all the women who were mentors for. So sorry. Boy.
You're okay.
Let me find you here. Sorry about that. So I don't know what's so funny while I come through. Anyway, she was the head. I find you here. There we are. Zoom. There we are. So of all the women who were trained in the usually long-termers, women who had severe mental illness. And she had a client that she took out into the yard one day, and the client, a long-termer, was a schizophrenic, and something just triggered this woman, and woman who's like 5'9", 250 pounds, and angry. And Ashley didn't take her in the second she wanted to go into her anxiety issues or whatever. And so this woman beat Ashley's face into the cement. I'd never witness anything like that before in my life. And Ashley was hospitalized for a month, broke both her cheekbones and like her eye sockets. Like she was a mess. And immediately after that, she was not allowed to retaliate. That's the thing, you can't fight back. And the guards cannot come to defend you unless there's two guards, because you can't have one guard on a prisoner. It just doesn't work. You have to have two guards. And so it took like 15 seconds. That was a lot of time. This woman, a lot of damage. Baruch Hashem, I mean, besides black eyes and whatever, a broken arm, I think, she was healing. After a month, she came out of the hospital. And for whatever reason, there was a consideration for her to be paroled. And she missed it because she was in the hospital. And they hadn't informed her, and she had paperwork to fill out, and she didn't get it in. This woman, no one was more suited to live out on her own, be healthy and happy, and lead a successful life, which she now does, more than Ashley was. And nobody deserved it more. She was so compassionate. And so I went to her, and I'll never forget what she looked like. She'd been hit by a truck. And I said, sweetheart, let me write your appeal for you. You're going to appeal it? Oh, I don't really know how to. I'll do it. Let's do it together. And sure enough, 10 days after we filed that appeal, the gates opened and she went home. And you figure out, like, there's a reason that you're here, and to collect people's stories that were so horrifying and so empowering at the same time for the people. One woman did not commit a crime. She was just got a ride from her friend. She's in a domestic abuse shelter, got a ride from an old friend, and another guy in the car had cocaine base in his backpack, and he said it was hers. And she got life with no chance. There was so much of it. She got life with no chance of parole. President Obama granted that. He didn't grant very many. It's not like the current administration where they're just giving out pardons for whatever. He didn't grant very many, and he sent her home. And when I spoke to her afterwards when she got home, she said, the only bad thing about me getting a letter from the president was that you weren't there to celebrate. I said, oh, I celebrated here, girl. There's no. Another one, 32 and a half years, did not commit a crime. A beautiful girl, 17 years old. She was a runaway, and the police informant was paid $35 to give it all her background information so he could pretend like, oh, they knew the same people in a small town in Iowa, given to go collect her from her day job, which was caregiver for her best friend's grandfather. And sure enough, he said, hey, I'm so-and-so, and I know so-and-so. And she was naive, 17. She believed him. And he said, can I give you a ride? And she said, oh, that'd be great. He said, but I needed to use the bathroom first. She said, well, I just cleaned the house for Grandpa, but if you go up and knock on the door and tell him that you're going to give me a ride, I'm sure he'll let you use the restroom. And so he knocked on the door, apparently used her name to get in. And 10 minutes later, comes running out with blood on his sweatshirt. And he had killed Grandpa, and he got $40. But because she had afforded him access in Iowa, that was enough. She was convicted with life and no murder in the first degree, life with no chance of parole, premeditated. She was nothing. So I read her files, and she came to me and she said, once every 10 years, she'd been there for 30 years already. Once every 10 years, I get the chance to speak to the parole board to see if they'll recommend me to the governor for commutation, one of those once a year things. And she only got it once every 10 years. And she said, and I need your help to prepare me. My attorney would help me, but he's not well. He's got a heart issue and he can't come. And it's in 5 days and I need to know what to say. I'm a writer, but I never wrote that. So I looked through her files. We went through her files. The staff was they wanted her to be released because they knew she was innocent, but they just couldn't do anything about it. And they let us sit together. And I said, you just have to keep repeating this. You were a child. You were 17 years old. And your only crime was to get into a car with a man that you didn't know. You didn't have any intent to kill him. You were a child and you made a mistake and you got in the car. And I said, as often as you can say that, you have to say that. I was a child, legally 17 as a child. I made a mistake. I got into a car with someone I don't. So she's like, okay, and I've got nothing else. So she went in. I was not allowed to hear her. She spoke for 45 minutes. They asked her questions. And she kept saying, I was a child. And then finally, the head of the parole board said, stop telling us you're a child. We know that. Just go on with the story. And that rankled somebody, a newspaper editor in the room, and they wrote an editorial about, wait a minute, didn't we do silly things as children? This is her the extent of her crime and da. And sure enough, they overturned her sentence to um, a life with a chance of parole. And then it took 2 years for it all to work out. And then she was free. And they're my Facebook friends now. So I was there for a purpose. There's one other Jewish woman in there. Her name is Esther Bas Anna. We kneel down for her. She did not commit a crime. And they have just locked up her case so tightly that after I got out, I tried to intervene, hired an attorney, and they said, we will reincarcerate you if you continue to push this. So I've had other people doing it and what have you, and we daven. I daven for every day. I say prayer until I'm 142, because we can do what we can do. I've still deployed people, but I sent her svarim. They would cancel them and send them back. Like it was just they just have it in for this gal. I don't know why. Anyway, long story short, it was an extraordinary experience. And I, every minute, had the opportunity to see that Hashem was there for me. And I wouldn't recommend it, but I was speaking once at a college, and this young man came up to me afterwards and he said, so did you always have this kind of a very close relationship with God? I said, well, if I would have, I probably wouldn't have had to go to prison. So I covered my hair the whole time. I had to wear whatever the garb was. I'll take questions, whatever it was. I had to wear scrubs the whole time. But if my Rav came, he lived to be 120, my Rav came, or any of the Rebbeim in the area, then I was allowed to put on a skirt. And the women would yell across the courtyard, your rabbi's here, your rabbi's here. They'd know if I was walking down to the gates because I was wearing a skirt. Like, oh. And so sure enough, and I filed the paperwork. It cost me 75 cents. And I filed the paperwork from the library that said that I was going to appeal I wanted a sentence reconsideration. My attorneys recommended against it. The judge hates you, and they're making a point here. And okay, great. But I asked my Rav, and he said, okay, go ahead. And the committee wrote letters, and the Rebbeim wrote letters and said, well, I'm happy to be a second set of eyes for her to make sure she stays in the straight and narrow. I've never been narrow, whatever. So anyway, I submitted it, and then the chief judge, because I submitted to the judge who had sentenced me. Now, let me go back 2 steps. 2 months after I was sentenced, the state film commissioner, who had 9 felony counts, he's a much better criminal than I am. We went on trial. And I know this because I was called to be a defense witness, which is just crazy that I'm putting myself on the stand. Anything I can say will be held against me. But somebody sends me a subpoena and they need my help, I'm going to go. So he and the tax credit broker, both of them, and the prosecutor gets in my face. The only time I've ever been asked a question ever. And he said, are you a scapegoat? And I just let it hang there. And after a long trial, same probably length as mine, the jury comes back for the former state film commissioner, who had authorized every single thing we did. We never did a single thing without speaking to him first and getting his approval, confirming with him. And that they said it was innocent of 8 charges, and he was guilty of 1. And the 1 charge he was guilty of, this is already after I have been sentenced. The one he was guilty of was the same level of conviction that I pled guilty to. And he said it was for felonious misconduct in office for misdirecting me. So the jury decided that the guy who gave the directions misdirected me. And the judge said, clearly, sir, you were overworked in your position. Same judge that gave me 10 years for being unrepentant. And he got a $750 fine, and he walked away. And I went to prison. Now, is it fair? Hashem decides it's fair. So, and then the tax credit broker, same thing, got no. They found him innocent of all charges, and he walked away. because we all did exactly what we were told to do. I didn't walk away so easily. That said, I filed this paperwork. The judge who had handled my case refused to acknowledge it. Legally, he has 30 days to acknowledge it. Okay, I'm going to see this or not. And I called my husband, and my husband said, I'll call it, called the courthouse, and the clerk of court connected them, put the chief judge of the whole district on the case, and he said, I'll take the case over from here. And I'd already appeared in front of him once, and that one time was because I asked very strongly, please, I'll go to trial. I have no problem standing up for myself, but I assigned my trial on Rosh Hashanah, and I don't want to go on Rosh Hashanah. It's the holiest day of the year. And they said, well, it's not a holiday in Iowa. And my attorney said, well, if you go to Hallmark in Iowa and you open a calendar, it does say Rosh Hashanah on there. And so that chief judge said, oh, okay, if that's the case, then we'll put your trial off. Who knows? So I met him. I walked in and shackled up. We go to steps. I said to my husband, I called him and said, they won't let me cover my hair once I'm out of the prison in the jail cell, in the jail. I won't walk into court without my hair covered. Period. End of discussion. I'll wear a towel on my head if they'll let me, but I will not go without my hair covered. I won't because I know there'll be rebellion in the gallery. I'm not doing that. I am not doing that. So my husband was told he could get a court order from one of the judges that I had to wear something on my head, and it had to only be hair. Sheitel couldn't be a hat. So because the mandate was pretty strict about hats, right? So my husband apparently gets here very early. One of the women in the community did my sheitel for me, and that beautiful smell to it. It was so fun, and I'd worn the same hat for 6 months and 4 days, and she did. So he goes to a courtroom that's kind of quiet. There's an old judge there, and he's sitting there. And he says, "Your Honor, I don't know what to do. My wife is appearing in Judge Gamble's court shortly, and she has to wear this for religious reasons, and I need a court order." And the guy looks at my husband, and he sees this blob of hair, and he says, "Not in my courtroom. I don't care what your wife wears on her head." And he signs this court order. So they take the court order and this beautiful sheitel. They take it and he goes, gives to the guard, and the guard has to give it to me. And all the other guards, like I'm in the holding cell and shackled up, and the guards are like, you have to wear this. And I'm like, well, thank God, And then I thought to myself, oh my gosh, sheitels have buckles. And if I have to go through the like a metal detector, which I would have to, they're going to see here the buckles. They're going to think I'm holding a weapon or something. So I said to them, and they're all terrified of this thing. This it's right side up, and it's just sitting there, and they're just nobody wants to touch it. They push it across the desk on this big piece of paper. And I realized they don't know what it is, and they've never seen a shake like that. They never saw a wig like this. So I said, if it's with your permission, may I turn over the wig to show you that it has metal clips in case there's an issue with the metal detector. When I turned it over, they saw that it was netting, and it was just like the hair was sewn in there. There's this 5 sheriffs, they really thought for a minute that my husband scalped some girl on the way down from Minnesota and cut off her hair so that I should be able to wear her hair. It was just so ridiculous. Fast forward for the sheitel, and all the staff and the guards had said to me point blank, one thing, memorize one sentence. Be remorseful, one sentence, and then don't say anything else. No matter what, no matter how the prosecutor tries to provoke you, I didn't have an attorney with me, just don't say, close your pie hole. That's what they said to me. Don't say another word. So I go in, the judge comes in, we stand up, and he says, can you tell me, what have you learned from this experience? And I give him my one line. I'm terribly sorry for all the problems I've caused, and it was never my intent, and I plan to do good things, and I'm prepared to sit down. And he's like, no, I have more questions for you. And I thought, Hashem, I don't know what to say. So I stand up and I said, yes, Your Honor. And he said, how did you do so much community service in prison? Apparently they have to log it all, and there was just papers and papers and papers. I canceled this one, I spoke to this one, this one, I taught this one how to do this, whatever it was they had. And he said, how did you do that? I said, that's what we do here. And he asked me, what do you take with you from this experience? And I said, listen, this I can remember. I said, I have, as I just told Sister Sandy, who was the nun, and she was in the courtroom, who was the former nun who ran the chapel library. I said, as I just spoke to Sister Sandy about, I have witnessed more of God's grace in 6 months than most people witness in a lifetime. And I'm truly blessed for the opportunity. And he just shook his head. He said, had I been presiding, it would have been a completely different outcome. You would not be here today. You would not be incarcerated at all. You're going home today. And that was it. Paperwork. And Baruch Hashem, my husband waited for me. And I walked out of there with 4 hours drive to Minneapolis. And we drove. We drove like crazy to get back home. I got home 7 minutes for candlelighting. And on my front porch was a bacher who had been biased by us. He became from in our house. And he was getting married the next week. And he'd carefully selected a wedding invitation that you can have ribbons, you can't have sparkles on any mail that goes out and comes in. And he carefully selected a wedding invitation that he could send to me in prison. But I couldn't RSVP sorry, not a no show. And standing on our front porch and his pulling wedding invitation, he said, please come to our house. He said, I would love to dance at your hospital. I would love to be there. And he said, Baruch Hashem. And then my kids came down, and I had called my kids on the way down. And Baruch Hashem, and the day before, my holy Rav had come in to give me shiur on Elul. Not knowing what was going to happen the next day. Very convinced. The most preeminent scholar in Bitachon, Rabbi Chaim Goldberger, has taught me everything I know about Bitachon and things I never expected to know. And he came to give me shiur. And the day before, I was still incarcerated. And we were a little long, and we brought the Jewish woman in for shiur because she deserved it. And we were in a lot of trouble. He was in a lot of trouble for that. And, I was going to lose the certification of volunteer. Like, he wanted to stay a volunteer once I was gone. And he turns around across the courtyard. He says, Mrs. Runge. I said, yes, Rabbi. He said, my wife and I would like to invite you and your family for Shabbos dinner tomorrow night. Will you? We didn't know what was going to happen. I said, yes, Rabbi, thank you. We'd love to. And the warden laughed. And he took the rabbi away. And we did. We went to the Rav for Shabbos. And so I'm going to cough now. I'm going to mute myself. I can't believe I got that far. Questions?
Okay, thank you, Wendy. Thanks for sharing your story. Who would like to start with the first question?
I would.
Who does?
Judy,
Judy. Okay, go for it.
your story is so magnificent, but I wanted to know, and your courage, but you also are a very bright woman that you could do all these wonderful, good helping these women. But how long was your stay in prison?
Thank you for your kind words. 6 months and 4 days.
Okay.
Now, that said, nobody expected that to be short. I didn't expect it to be 10 years because it's just not, there's a certain atmosphere there. You just know if you do good things. So that said, I'm not being self-facing. I only have 3 skills, Judy. I only have 3. I can write. I can tell a pretty good story. And I collect amazing people who do the rest of the stuff. That's it. I built my whole life on those 3. That said, I think that anybody can go in with compassion, go into a foreign atmosphere with compassion and making eye contact and having that and letting other people know. Imagine the first thing they take from you when you go to prison, they take away your hope. You're not getting out. They're not going to wait for you. They take your hope away. If you can empower people to maintain hope, you're the belle of the ball. And there's always hope. I quoted all the time. I quoted Rebbeim, but I quoted Rabbi Dr. Abraham Twersky Zatzal all the time about his lobster story. I'm sure you've all heard it, but it's short and I'll tell it again in 1 second. He explains that lobsters, he doesn't care about lobsters, but he's in a dentist's office reading a magazine and he's got time to kill. So he's looking at this article and how are lobsters born? He doesn't care, but he's there. Might as well, there's a reason. So lobsters are a squishy little thing and they hatch from an egg and they have to scamper under a rock and they're completely vulnerable until their exoskeleton forms a day or two. And then they emerge from under the rock where they were safe and they go do lobster things. They eat, they play, whatever. And after a while, they grow. And then that shell is a little bit uncomfortable. That's a lot uncomfortable. They have to go under a rock again, shed their exoskeleton, grow a new one, totally vulnerable the whole time, and go out and do the lobster things. And apparently, I'm sorry, in the lifespan of a lobster, they do that 12 or 15 times. He said, if you were a person who did that, he said, and you go to a doctor, you say, I'm uncomfortable. They give you a Percocet, they give you a Vicodin, they give you, Narishka. They don't tell you that that's the catalyst for growth is to be uncomfortable and to be like, wait, I'm uncomfortable here. Where can I go that's a safe place that I can figure out how to grow to my next level and then go out there and have my life? So we hide, we self-medicate, we do all kinds of crazy things that we don't need to do. Hashem, if he gave it to lobsters, he gave it to us. The ability to understand our fears, everything we do. Go under the rock, go where you're safe, grow through the discomfort, figure out how to deal with it, and then go on. So many of them, this was a light bulb for them. I had women who used to walk past me. Even they tell each other this story at night, when they're in their cells, and they would go like this because they wanted to be a lobster. They wanted me to know that they wanted to be a lobster. They wanted to be somebody who could go somewhere safe, figure out what the next step is, and then go on. So once you understand how they've never been given a chance, and the first thing they've been hope, most of them, a lot of them haven't had a chance, and a lot of them hope is been stripped from them. Tell them there's always hope. There's always hope.
That's beautiful, beautiful. But I want to tell you that the Torskys are from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. His father was one of the most famous rabbis, and then all the sons. And one of the sons also wrote books, and they're very well known.
So Reb Michal Tversky was the first Rav who looked at all my stuff and said, "You're not guilty." I said, "I know. What do I do?" And he said, "We're going to write you a letter." Other Jewish organizations didn't really want to get involved because Reb Michal and my husband were very close. My husband was the first boy ever enrolled in Litz in Chofetz Chaim in Milwaukee.
Oh, wow!
It's all the time. And our two sons, were the first one of the first second generation that went to Litz, and they've been close to Reb Michal. So when I got out of prison, I called my son in New York, my daughter in Israel, she knew, my husband, called my son, called my two little younger ones in Minnesota, and called my parents. And then in the 15 seconds of time I had left on my phone, wasn't charged, I called Reb Michal and Reb Tefegi, and they danced around the table.
Oh, yes. Outstanding, outstanding people in the community and all over. Fortunate for you to have met them.
Oh,
Thank you.
so much.
Anybody else with questions? Comments? Just come off of mute and speak up. Anybody have a comment?
I'll make a comment as I chew my food. Sorry. Wendy, first of all, thank you so much for Lori for making this happen. Just beautiful. Like you had me in tears, laughing, crying. Such hope. And it just reminds me of like these last few parshiot, where, especially last week when, with Yosef he's in there, and that's exactly why he was there, right? did what he needed to do while he was there. And Sapir Cohen, the hostage, right? She said she realized she was there for a reason, and then she directed her attention to helping a 16-year-old girl hostage who was terrified. And it's so beautiful to hear your story. What a beautiful story of hope. And I knew you were amazing, but I never heard the full story. It's really beautiful.
The funny thing is, like, Hashem wouldn't put us there if there weren't a lot of people around us that we can affect.
Yeah.
You know, you like with your kidney, and it's so amazing. Like, there's so many things. Like,
right.
Once you've been through something, it's like there's a lot of people who come to you and say, "Could I do the same thing?" You know, not to say, and I wouldn't recommend it. Like, I'm not like, hey, go to prison because it's a lot of fun. Actually, I did have a lot of fun. No, I did laugh a lot, but it was a really interesting experience. People say, "Oh, if you had to do it over again, would you?" Yeah, I would. It wasn't.
Wendy, what's the biggest change in your life before and after?
I take very little for granted now. It's my my parents used to write me the most beautiful letters in prison. The guards would walk around and they'd say, "Who writes like this to their kid in prison?" Say, my parents do. So it was appreciating them for what it must have been for them. But it's so funny, like certain things, like I didn't have a lot of food. So, I mean, I was very limited in what I could, they didn't let me have much, and whatever. It was their own shtick. I was speaking for Vikar Colin to Satmar after I got out, and a woman comes running, huge group, 1,000 women in London. It was beautiful. And a woman comes running over to me, and she said to me, "Hi," British accent, "Hi," gives a big hug. "Hi, I'm so-and-so, the Chabad rabbi in Des Moines, is my son-in-law, and I made and packed up all your food for Pesach." So, and I said, "That's amazing. Thank you so much." And she said, "How was it?" And I said, I hate to tell you this, but they chose not to give it to me. They didn't give me anything for Pesach. She's like, "What do you mean? Like, we packed it up, it was labeled, and it was in whatever it was." They decided at 4 o'clock on the Erev Pesach that I wasn't going to get any food. You'll just have to eat what we send you. And my wildest dreams, I could never imagine. The Rebbeim had been my Rav, everybody had been so fantastic to at least accommodate. I mean, Aleph, thank God, it's a good organization. I had a little bit of matzah, a little bit of kosher, but that was, whatever. I kept sending the food back. I'm not taking it. It can't be in my possession. I'm not having it. I'm not taking it. They're sending me to the doctor. Never in my dreams did I think that they forgot me. I knew it was some shenanigans in the prison. So I think I maybe have a better eye now. I think, oh, that's, Kab's chus, like, I'm going to give this benefit of the doubt. All that said, I think that I appreciate things like the first lilac. I love lilacs. There's a little lilac bush, one flower bush in the whole prison grounds. And it was outside the chapel, the sacred place they call it the chapel. And and it was just there. And that one little tiny schwacha little thing had one cluster of blooms. And when did that bloom? On Shavuos. Oh my gosh, I was over the moon. They're like, "What's the big deal?" It's for me. Like, it happened for me. This is for me. And they're like, "Okay," So I do see a lot of interesting things that I didn't see before. I try and keep that. I never have a bad weather day because I just it doesn't affect me. So those things, again, that's something I would advocate. Go out and rob a bank.
Okay. Right. Beautiful. Thank you very much, Wendy. We all want to thank you. We're going to share the story on YouTube, and anybody who wants to know more about upping their bitachon and amuna and getting closer to Hashem, you can certainly contact Wendy or join our one-a-day gratitude Tehillim group. Chaya just joined us recently, and people are joining us all the time. So again, thank you, thank you.
There's always a message in the mess. You
A
can't
message in the mess.
You only see the mess. Look for the message. I promise you, it's there. Can't have one without the